Good afternoon. Welcome to the marketplace. Coming up, government reaches agreement with bilateral creditors on terms for restructuring over $5 billion debt, a move expected to pave way for IMF board meeting to disburse second tranche funding by the end of this month. Also coming up, inflation for the month of May drops to 23.1%. We'll hear from the government statistician.
In May 2024, the headline consumer price index stood at 220.0 relative to 178.7. Given these relative indices, year-on-year inflation for the month of May 2024 was 23.1%.
Plus, President Akufo-Addo joins other African leaders, finance ministers, and central bank governors to deliberate on improving trade and financial payments within the region at the annual meeting of African Export and Import, Afrexim Bank annual meetings there, which opens in Nassau, Bahamas. My name is Darryl Kwao. Thanks for being with us. Details coming up. Well, first up, government has reached an agreement with bilateral creditors on terms to restructure the over $5 billion debt. George Ape has more from the official statement from the Finance Ministry.
The development should mean that the bilateral creditors, through the Official Creditor Committee, have agreed on the broad terms on how the debts that Ghana owes them should be restructured. This was after all the two parties finally agreed on the terms through the Memorandum of Understanding. The development may also pave the way for a formal agreement to be signed in Paris, France next week. Joy Business is learning that the Official Creditor Committee has already reached out to the International Monetary Fund about this development. It may now help the International Monetary Fund Board to go ahead and set a meeting date on Ghana in terms of approving the second tranche of funds of $360 million for the country. The Ministry of Finance in the statement also noted that they expect this development to trigger the release of other donor funding for Ghana, as well as infrastructure projects that have stalled to resume soon. The Ministry of Finance added that Ghana will now move to also sign an individual country agreement in terms of the debt restructuring with each of the members of the Official Creditor Committee. The Ministry of Finance maintained that this deal being struck will fast-track the current discussions with commercial creditors when it comes to the comparability treatment on debt restructuring issues.
Well, Associate Professor of Finance at the Andrews University, Professor Williams Reprise on Zoom with us this afternoon. He has been following closely the external debt restructuring negotiations. Thank you for joining us, Prof. You have read the Finance Ministry statement on the progress made so far, confirming what we have been reporting in the last few days. Now, the government in the statement is expecting a few things from our official creditors. We want to read a bit of it. It says that Ghana continues to engage in good faith. No, I think there's one, not this one. We have another slide that says that each official creditor will now follow its internal procedures to sign the MoU. Once signed, the agreed terms will be implemented through bilateral agreements with each OCC member. We call upon our official creditors to fast-track their internal processes towards the signing of the bilateral agreements, and it appears, Prof, that time is of the essence for the government.
Darryl, and good afternoon to your viewers. I mean, as you mentioned rightly, time is really of essence to the government of Ghana and also the Ministry of Finance. I mean, this deal is very important for bringing back our economy on track. The financial situation is getting out of hand. If you look at what is happening, and the IMF second tranche deal brings in the confidence that is required. So that is why it is very, very important that all parties, all the bilateral countries work quickly to ensure that we're able to reach an amicable arrangement in in the debt restructuring process. Indeed, if you look at the statement very carefully, it did not. It gives each individual country a room to negotiate with Ghana. So I'm sure that by now they have received all the terms from the Ministry of Finance and they are going through it. Our prayer is that none of them should come out with any hindrance that will cause a delay. So that is what we are praying for, because the internal processes sometimes may be choked with some other factors, and which will require our government to still go on negotiating. So my advice to government is that they must put up a team as they have been working to be contacting these bilateral creditors frequently and regularly to be able to ensure that if they have any issue on the agreement that they are about to sign, it can be ironed out immediately, and that should not cause any delay. This announcement has come at the right time, but it keeps on. If this process delay for about 2 weeks, it's also going to have an impact on the currency as we have seen.
Yeah, we know what is happening with the currency, so fingers crossed by the end of this month, we hope to have inked the deal. But Ghana is also working to finalize negotiations with Eurobond and commercial creditors next week in London, Prof. And the Ministry of Finance statement said Ghana continues to engage in good faith with all commercial external creditors, striving to finalize restructuring agreements that respect Ghana's need for debt relief and the comparability of treatment principle. Now, Ghana also reiterates its firm commitment to remain in arrears with its external commercial creditors until agreements compatible with the comparability of treatment principle are reached. And essentially what this is saying is that commercial creditors, as we understand it, want to be treated similarly, and that has affected the progress of negotiations. How should the government navigate this?
There are four main points that I think that the government can use to navigate this situation. The first one is that when it comes to communication, it must be transparent. Transparent communication means that it must be communicated regularly and clearly. So whatever message government is using to negotiate with these commercial creditors must be firmed back and clearly communicated. Then in terms of the negotiation approach, it must be a cohesive negotiation strategy. The issue of treating all parties equally and in an equitable way is very, very important. The parties will want to believe that if the restructuring is going to be about 20% or 10%, it should be across board. And that has been the major concern. It looked like maybe our government did a segmented approach, used a segmented approach, and was going to have different strategies for different debt Eurobond holders. So, but from the discussion, they want to be treated fairly and equally, and this is a principle that must be upheld. And so that kind of block negotiation, having a one figure for all of them is much needed. All parties will feel that we have been treated equally and fairly. So that means that our government must go with a good faith form of negotiation. And then the last approach is that the government may have to rely on what they have achieved with IMF and the World Bank to be able to find a way to conclude this kind of negotiation. So they need to leverage on both IMF and World Bank, bring them in to make sure that this is achieved.
Well, I want to switch topics and talk about inflation because inflation for the month of May has decreased to 23.1%. This represents a decline of 1.95 percentage points from the month of April, which was at 25%. Now, according to the Ghana Statistical Service, food inflation declined by 4.2% to hit 22.6%, while non-food inflation increased to 23.6%. I'll pick your reaction, Prof, in a bit, but first let's hear from the government statistician, Professor Samuel Kobne-Nim, addressing the press a while ago.
Month of May 2024, the Consumer Price Index stood at 220.0, relative to 178.7 the same time 2023. In May 2024, the headline consumer price index stood at 220.0 relative to 178.7. Given these relative indices, year-on-year inflation for the month of May 2024 was 23.1%. This literally means that between May 2023 and May 2024, prices of goods and services went up by 23.1%. Prices of goods and services between the month of May 2023, a year on to the month of May 2024, went up by 23.1%. This indicates a slowdown of 1.9 percentage points relative to the year-on-year inflation that was recorded in the month of April 2024. In the month of April 2024, year-on-year inflation stood at 25.0, indicating a 0.8 percentage point drop relative to the figure that was recorded in March 2024, and we've seen for the second consecutive time a drop in the year-on-year inflation by 1.9 percentage points to the current year-on-year inflation for May 2024 standing at 23.1%. On a month-on-month basis, given the index of 220.0 for May 2024 relative to April 2024 index of 213.3, month-on-month inflation for May 2024 was 3.2%, simply indicating that between April 2024 and May 2024, prices of goods and services went up by 3.2%. This 3.2% that we've recorded for the month of May 2024 is a rise from 1.8% that was recorded in April 2024 to 3.2% for May 2024.
You heard the voice there of the government statistician, Professor Samuel Kwabena, addressing the press a while ago. Professor Pepa, how do you interpret the drop witnessed in May?
Darrell, so if you look at what has happened from May 2023 to May 2024, we can see that the rate of growth or the speed that prices in Ghana or items in Ghana were going up has reduced. It does not mean that prices are not going up. Prices are going up, but not at that speed that it were in May 2023. So in May 2023, around 42.2% and now dropping to 23.1%. Even if you look at April 2024, we see a 1.9% drop. So this is point to, a form of ensuring economic stability. However, based on the targets set by the government of Ghana, inflation should go down a little bit. And in my perspective, this has been the trend for Ghana. Between April, May, June, July, we see inflation dropping. All because we have the food basket. That's the time we have some kind of food commodities on the market.
Even when we are seeing a rise in the cost of transport fares going up based on the figures presented by the government statistician?
Yeah, so the impact of the cost of transport, if you look at the data, has not significantly affected a lot of items. If you look at it, though local production or produce inflation went up by 24.7%, and the imported one reduced. So in terms of the real impact of the transportation, if you ask me, it's going to reflect in prices from June, July thereafter. The just a 1 month interval, we will not see the real impact. I'm sure within the month of June, I've seen some posts going up with some food items being increased like 300% and 150%. And let's wait and see what will be the inflation figure. But the anticipation is that probably inflation may peak maybe from somewhere June, July, September thereafter. That is where we will really see the impact of the increase in transportation.
All right, we'll keep watching. Thank you so much, Professor Williams Repart, the Associate Professor of Finance at the Andrews University. Thank you so much for your time. Moving on, the World Bank in its latest Global Economic Prospects report has forecast a GDP growth rate of 2.9% for Ghana in 2024. This is 0.1 percentage points higher to government's target of 2.8% in the 2024 budget presented by the finance minister. Here's more.
According to the World Bank, growth in sub-Saharan Africa is projected to pick up from 3% in 2023 to 3.5% in 2024 and about 4% annually in 2025 and 2026 as fading inflationary pressures allow for interest rate cuts. This is expected to support private consumption and investment. Growth in the region's largest three economies, namely Nigeria, South Africa, and Angola, is expected to accelerate from 1.8% in 2023 to 2.4% in 2024 and an average of 2.6% in 2025 to 2026. On Ghana, the World Bank forecasts a GDP growth of 2.9% in 2024, 4.4% in 2025, and 4.9% in 2026. It's however warned that risks to the outlook are tilted to the downside. Downside risks include increasing global geopolitical tensions, especially an escalation of the conflict in the Middle East. In addition, it's warned that consumer price inflation could prove to be stickier than expected or pick up again, driven, for example, by food price inflation caused by supply
President Akufo-Addo is today joining other African presidents to kickstart discussions on how to improve trade in the region and develop homegrown payment systems. This will happen in Nassau, Bahamas, where the African Export and Import Afro-Exim Bank is holding its annual meetings, as well as the third Afro-Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum, which also formally opens in that country today. Here's more from George Yafi, who is covering for us.
Export and Import Bank, Afro-Exim, is an African multilateral institution created to finance and promote trade within and outside Africa. It currently provides funding for trade and other project initiatives, as well as sovereign and syndicated loans for several African countries. It is currently owned by African governments, the African Development Bank, and other private investors. The bank is currently financing some projects and other initiatives totaling $1.7 billion for Ghana. However, this support could go up further as Ghana is negotiating fresh support from the bank. The country currently chairs the Shareholders and Advisory Group, and the Minister of State at the Ministry of Finance, Abnasi Asare, is leading government delegation, and she will be leading some of these discussions and negotiations on these facilities, as well as the fresh support for Ghana.
You're watching The Marketplace. Time to talk tech. And our ever-faithful pundit, Henry Kobler, lead for Eyes of Africa, is here with us for Let's Talk Tech. We are going to be talking about artificial intelligence because it's still dominating the headlines. And good to see you, Henry. Apple, the iPhone maker, is feeling the AI heat and is starting to make changes. Tell us about it.
Thank you very much, Dario. So, generally, when you look at how Apple operates, it would definitely do a lot of R&D into every part of what it would really set to come into Apple devices, because it's a proper ecosystem, and so generally quite a lot of people are concerned about what comes into it. If I'm using iOS, I'm more concerned about the security, and so I sort of feel very safe when it gets down to Apple. And so them now connecting to OpenAI's ChatGPT relatively is a very big one. I really had some skeptic about it because generally I felt that they're already with Microsoft, and then they're sort of connecting to Apple that really now leverages on the same platform. And so generally there's going to be quite a lot of data, because these are the two major operating platforms that are sort of coming together. Microsoft relatively throwing in the Microsoft OSs and all of that, now basically integrating it in every part of it. And then Apple relatively also coming in with that ecosystem. That connection relatively is very huge. Quite a number of people sitting on it. I could estimate almost about 90% of people relatively on these OSs. And then as much as possible, its major part, which is The OSS mainly is also now going to have it, and Siri itself is going to have a lot of integrations carried out through it. That gives me a lot to think about, but I think that it's a step in the right direction. Artificial intelligence cannot be ruled out, but generally, where you sit and what kind of natural languages you're going to be connected to also matters. And I think that it's a good one in the direction which it comes. I've seen some skepticism coming out from quite a lot of industry players, but I think that the heat is getting to Apple. It's relatively done its R&D and feels that ChatGPT and the open AI whole community relatively fits better with the Apple ecosystem. I think it's a one good shot to go with.
Well, also, as we know it, Apple is partnering with OpenAI, like you point out, to boost its Siri voice assistant, also its operating systems, I think. I mean, for the user, how is this going to enhance the experience with Apple?
I think that we're still in the early hours of understanding how the generative AI comes into play and how it's really going to shape the point of how we get to feel it directly. I mean, I basically sent a mail which I drafted with OpenAI's ChatGPT. And I mean, humans are starting to relatively get to understand that, okay, this looks like an AI buffer kind of thing. And so generally, I can understand how it's sort of evolving. And so them putting at the connection at the very early stages, I think that relatively gives it a lot more information to learn and understand. I'm only concerned about what are the regulations that are going to cover for it, because I mean, it's going to hit on all the devices on the ecosystem, relatively integrated into Siri, which is already smart and has some level of features into understanding most of the things that we do. I mean, it plunges into everything that we do, not just the operating user experience, but in almost all the applications that you're sort of using. It basically has a hand in there. It could read your mail. I mean, Siri generally, even without AI, could read your mails, could understand, tell you quite a lot of things, play music and all of that. I mean, quite smart enough to do that. And so now coming in with a natural language to sort of generate quite a lot of things for you, I think it gives you a better experience. But again, also has quite a lot of concerns when it gets down to security, in terms of protocol, in terms of financial inclusions, even because you're relatively going to have this intrude in every part of your life, including your economic life, on your devices. And so that raises a lot of concerns. I think that regulation comes into play better here. But I think that it gives you a better experience from my point of view. It's really going to be exciting to see how it plays out on that ecosystem.
Well, we've been making a point that businesses can no longer do without AI, and this like a typical example of that. I want to still talk about AI, the AI wars going on, and what has Elon Musk got to do with it, Henry?
So Elon, I mean, generally, if you're looking at it, I mean, immediately this was announced by Apple and OpenAI. Elon had tweeted and mentioned that he's not really in favor of this, and so he's sort of going to ban almost everybody in his company from using iPhones within the sets.
Oh, really?
And even visitors relatively will have to leave the iPhones at the entrances of all his companies, which comes in as a bigger threat. But generally, I realized that there's been a publication today where he is actually dropping the case against OpenAI for a bit of time, which is very interesting, because that comes in at the week where he's always been against what OpenAI relatively seeks to do. I mean, his point has always been that he feels that OpenAI is now going for profit, especially when the technology has not really taken shape and is still in the evolution stages.
Right.
If you're throwing it out into people's hands because of profit, you're relatively going to have some level of abuse. Out of that, he had even created a company, XAI, where he really feels that it's going to focus on reality, which comes into play directly in the war. But for him to drop the case today gives me a lot to think about, because that's one force that really generally comes to shaping the policies and the regulations that come around AI in terms of regulation. And so if he's just dropping the case like that, then there's sort of not a lot of much process or force that's going into the operations of what OpenAI generally would do or they could do, especially with his understanding on that. But generally, I feel that it's a good thing where AI is really picking up, and there have been quite a lot of concerns being raised. I think that policies relatively coming to do much of the shaping, but a lot of industry players who have a lot of influence could also do quite a lot, like what Elon had started, but relatively I'll drop that along the line.
We have just 30 seconds. I just want you to touch on GitHub because players in the telecoms and tech industries were recognized over the weekend. What were the highlights for you?
Amazing stuff. I mean, my favorite company is ePay. I mean, relatively had plugged in around 5 awards, which is interesting. And then, I mean, you have companies like Knet, which I think that they really doing quite a lot of work as well, also clocking some major awards that's coming in. Ascent Digital showed up some level. I had realized that chatbot, which comes into play for Fidelity Bank, had also clocked in some awards. And GCB Bank, I think that had also gotten their mobile application get some level of recognition. I mean, it's good that you're having a lot of players in the industry doing so much and being able to put in some level of work to these deserving awards. But I think that there's a lot more within the digital ecosystem that has to be done. And I feel that the Ministry of Information and the whole ecosystem players should relatively come together and put in some level of work. So congratulations to the people that had won these awards, and I think that there's a lot more to do.
Thank you so much, Henry Kobler, lead for Eyes of Africa. Appreciate your time with us on The Marketplace. And that's our program this afternoon. Thanks for watching, everyone. More news on our website, myjoyonline.com/business. You can read more about the latest inflation figures and what the decline, what triggered the decline that we saw in the month of May. myjoyonline.com/business. We leave you with our Money Lab episode for today.
Hello, thank you for joining us on Money Lab. My name is Nana Asantiamuako, Head of Consumer Experience at Enterprise Trustees. In our previous edition, we discussed the importance of consolidating your pension fund. Today, we'll be talking about the importance of updating your beneficiary information on your pension account. As a member of a pension scheme, you are required to nominate beneficiaries for your account. This will ensure that in the unfortunate event that you are no more, your surviving beneficiaries, such as your children, spouse, or other family members, will have a seamless and smooth experience accessing your accrued benefits in your pension accounts. To update your beneficiary details, kindly contact your corporate trustee for assistance. Act now and nominate your beneficiaries today to secure your future and that of your loved ones. So we come your way again in our next edition. Remember to plan well and retire well.